Greetings, friends. This is Stan Husted, the creator and perhaps the founder of the Cowboy Up podcast. Well, our cowboys and radio wranglers are taking a couple of weeks off. They certainly deserve it. And what we're going to do is do a radio encore of some of our best programs for the next week or two. And we know you'll enjoy them. So here was the program we did with that quite a writer, author, and obviously a great broadcaster too, C.J. Box.
Welcome to the Cowboy Up podcast, where talk is all about the West. This episode is sponsored by White Stallion Ranch and produced by Cowboy Spirit USA. C.J. Box is a best-selling and beloved author of contemporary Western fiction, best known for his Joe Pickett series. C.J. joins Russell and Alan to talk about how his writing life came to be and where it has taken him.
Morning, Alan. Good to see you. You know, we've got quite a show today. We've got best-selling contemporary Western novelist C.J. Box joining us from his home in Wyoming, of course, where our family's from.
Well, I've really been looking forward to this show. C.J. Box is one of my all-time favorite authors, and I've worn my eyes out reading his books.
Those Joe Pickett novels, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, he's written 21 of those, 21 novels, and featuring game warden Joe Pickett. He has a new Pickett novel titled Shadows Reel, releasing on March 8th. So just coming up, my little daughter is going to be 4 on March 9th. He's also written 7 standalone novels and earned a big bunch of awards, among them the Edgar Allan Poe Award, a Gumshoe Award, a McCavity, a Western Heritage Award from the National Cowboy Museum, Spur Award from Western Writers. His books have been translated into more than 27 languages. Over 10 million have sold in the U.S. alone. The TV series Big Sky on ABC and Joe Pickett on Spectrum Originals, all based on his novels. CJ will be a featured author at the Tucson Festival of Books, one of the biggest festivals in America, on March 12th and 13th. I imagine he's going to draw some crowds there.
Well, welcome, CJ. We're just thrilled to have you today.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
What's the weather like up there in Wyoming? I got an email from one of my cousins yesterday. She said it was 7 below, which is a number that I can't really even comprehend.
Yeah, we live out on a little ranch in southern Wyoming. We've had a tough winter, and about 8 inches of snow yesterday, and this morning it was 6 below here, although I think it's warmed up to about 4.
Well, I had a ranch in South Dakota and spent some time in the winter up there, but I always said I could hear Mama calling me down here in Tucson when it got that cold, and out the door I'd go.
I understand, believe me. Usually a normal winter is plenty of snow. We're by the mountains, but snow and then a lot of sunshine, and it usually melts off, and then snow again. This year has just been pretty brutal. We've had snow on the ground since Christmas, and it just keeps piling up.
Wow. Well, I'm sitting in Tucson, Arizona, enjoying weather that I won't even bring up to you right now, but because of a blizzard in Denver, because my parents were living there and they'd had it. One day my dad said, that is it. That's the last one. I'm gone. You know, I'm pretty sure I met you. A great friend of mine is a friend of yours, Dean Ruffing, because you were in the travel business.
That's right. Oh, that's a connection I did not expect. Prior to the books kind of becoming my full-time job, my wife and I had a company that did international tourism marketing on behalf of 5 Rocky Mountain states. And we had offices overseas in Europe and Scandinavia and Australia and Asia. And I spent 24 years traveling the world to travel shows and so on to try to convince tour operators and travel agents and journalists to, send tourists to the Rocky Mountain West. And I met Dean at many of those travel shows.
Yeah, Dean's kind of like a celebrity. I think we met at IPW, and you had your books, and I think Dean twisted your arm, and I got to bring one home signed. But Dean knows everybody at those shows. Well, anyway,
He does.
Well, I'm fascinated. Let's switch horses here for a minute. How did you get into writing, and what took you from the travel business into the literary business? I really am fascinated.
Well, I've always been a writer. I think if you're a writer, you're sort of hardwired to be a writer, whether you're successful or not. And my interest always in high school and college was journalism. And, I got a scholarship in journalism to the University of Denver, and then worked on a small Wyoming newspaper after that, a weekly newspaper. And then at that time was working on a first manuscript, but it took another 20 years to actually get a published novel from that very first manuscript. But in the meanwhile, that's when I was doing the travel business. I was never I'm proud to say I was never a starving artist. Pretty successful.
Well, you hear about that a lot, but you never went down that road.
No, never went down that road. I had a family, 3 daughters, and to support. I couldn't just sit around and talk about my art all the time. In fact, my daughters growing up didn't even know that I wrote until I actually had a book contract, because I didn't want them to just know me as their dad, the failed novelist. But,
well, how many rejections did you get before you got an acceptance and a sale, and then did it quickly follow that you got more, or talk to us a minute about that?
I had kind of a weird path, because I knew well enough that the first couple of manuscripts that I worked on, in my mind, weren't good enough. So I never really submitted them. I used them more as self-training. And my wife, who is she's the smartest one of the two, would read them and offer suggestions and say, maybe if you could improve this or improve that. And it took a long time to get a novel that she thought and I thought was good enough to be published. And then it took another 5 years. And it wasn't, strangely enough, I didn't have a ton of rejection slips like you read about. What would happen would be that the book would just languish somewhere for, a year, 18 months. And then finally I'd say, can I just have it back if you're not going to do anything with it?
Hey, you wouldn't loan her out for a while, would you?
Well, yeah. But then when it finally did get accepted by Penguin Putnam, it was 2001, and the book was, I called it Joe Pickett, but they retitled it Open Season, which I'm glad they did. Then it became a big deal. It was reprinted 5 times, 6 times, I think, in hardcover, and was a New York Times notable book, and won more Best First Novel awards than any book in this genre to date. And then the publisher wanted a book a year with Joe Pickett, and that's how the series was born. I didn't plan it out strategically, and I never thought I'm writing the first book of a long series. Never.
Wow.
I was writing a book, and it still took another 10 years to where, which would mean 10 books. It took another 10 years before the book income started to rival the travel business income, and I realized I could do that full time.
Did you hand off that travel business to somebody else? Is it still there?
Yeah, it is still there. My wife ran it for the next 4 years, and then we sold it to our employees. And it's still, although you can imagine, international travel business has been pretty rough the last couple of years.
I'm on the receiving end of that reality.
Yeah.
Or we are.
And now it's starting to gear up again. but they did not go out of business, and I hope they have great success.
Are you still on the book a year program?
Well, even more than that, really. There's a Joe Pickett book every year, and then there has been it started out to be a standalone book, but turned into kind of a series with Cody Hoyt and Cassie Duell every other year. So I'm kind of on a book and a half a year schedule. That varies somewhat, but I'm always working, and it's the best job I've ever had.
Well, I love that. Does it get a little panicky right at the end of the year? Do you ever think, a year's about up and I'm behind on this, or does it roll around in a happy mode?
I try to stay ahead of schedule. It never, I've only had a couple of times where I felt a little under the gun. I try to look ahead. I know when my deadlines are. I've signed the contract. It's gotten to the point now with, especially with the Joe Pickett novels, and I'm just working on my 22nd one, where it's kind of a machine. I mean, the publisher will have the cover done. It'll be available to order online. It'll have the description long before I even have it finished. So, that brings some pressure right there.
Do you go out in the wild, and is that where you get your inspiration, or how do you wake up one morning and you think, here he goes again, and then follow him on his...
I've never really had a problem with ideas. Sometimes I have a problem with the time, with that kind of pace, with writing the 2 books plus the book tours that are involved, and other, going to book conventions and fairs, and plus I like, fly fishing and hunting is important to me too. So I try to work all that in, and now we have grandkids. So I'm very, very busy, but ideas are not the problem, because what I've kind of done since the very beginning, since open season, is I explore contemporary issues or controversies within the book, through the characters. And there's always so many, hot button issues in the West and the Mountain West that people are talking about that I'm interested in. And so I use those kind of, I never start out with a whodunit kind of plot. It's always every book is going to be about something that I think is of interest to me, and I hope to the reader, whether it's
kind of an issue more than a plot, would it be?
Yeah, I start with the issue and research the heck out of it by, traveling and interviewing people and so on. And then once I've got that, well enough in hand that I think I can write about it, then I try to build a plot around those issues or controversies that will, in effect, pull a reader through those topics. And it's not really a formula, but it works for me. I know not all authors do that, but I try to do all the research and then do a long, long outline, starting with chapter 1 to the end, and then I start writing on top of that outline until the book is done.
Would it be safe to say that you have the issue and then you insert Joe Pickett into the issue as you write? Is that kind of am I hearing that wrong?
That is exactly right. And because Joe Pickett is a game warden and he's out in the field and he's dealing with, hunters and fishers and landowners and, environmental issues and resource issues, it usually works out pretty seamlessly. Plus the fact that Wyoming game wardens in real life tend to get involved in all kinds of things. They're not just out handing out tickets for, not having a fishing license. They're involved in mainly because I think the state is so small. They're involved in everything. And, even murder investigations and kidnapping and hostage situations. If it's a small rural area, they'll call in all the, law enforcement. That often means game wardens as well.
So it seems like a great formula. I'm sure that's why it's been so successful, because you stay on a topic and make it contemporary. What the latest book? What's obviously without giving out the story? What's the topic?
Well, Shadows Reel. The title comes from a Yeats poem called The Second Coming, where once you read the lines of it, you'll recognize so many of those lines that have been used over and over and over again through literature for 100 years, because they're just so bold and interesting. And there's a line in there about real shadows and shadows real. And it's about things coming apart at the seams. Society, there's a line about mere anarchy, falconry, which is an important part of the book. So it was a perfect kind of poem to kind of use as an undergirding of the book. But what happens in Shadows Reel, there's two major plot lines. One involving Joe Pickett is that his wife, Marybeth, is a director of the local library, and somebody has dropped off an authentic Nazi photo album from one of the top Nazis in the German government in 1937. And she doesn't know why somebody dropped it off at the library, but soon after that, she realizes that there's some people, she doesn't know who, want desperately to get it back. So Joe involves, himself with her, and people start dying around in the county who might have something to do with the photo album, and that pursues out through the entire book. The other plot line that's going on in this one, it's really kind of two novels that come together at the end, is that Nate Romanowski, who's Joe Pickett's kind of outlaw falconer buddy, is pursuing a bad guy across the Pacific Northwest who has beaten up his wife and threatened his daughter and taken all of his falcons. So it's kind of a road novel as well as an at-home novel, and it all kind of comes together in the end.
Well, that sounds fascinating. And a quick question: do you ever go out in the backwoods and you see a scene? You come across a stream or a glade or something, and you kind of memorize that and then put that in a book, or are they all those scenes that are so vivid and so good in your books? Are they just out of your head, or do they reflect on places you've seen?
Oh no, when I'm out and about. Like I say, I'm a pretty avid hunter and fisherman, and I always take a little notebook. And even though I'm not maybe, taking the notes for the book I'm writing, I'm setting a scene of a place or a feeling or what the light looks like, or wildlife or whatever, so that later I can kind of recall that. And I find it very strange. I tend to write about the winter better in the summer, and the summer better in the winter, because then I have to really think about it and not just look out the window. So it really makes me, write all those things. And I try not to go over the top with descriptions of nature and so on, but basically to set the scene.
Well, that sounds just the way to do it. We're going to just take a real quick break and be right back.
Okay.
Hi, this is Stan once again, and again, I'm enjoying it the second time, maybe even the third time. Hey, we would like to encourage you, as this program is going around the world, and by the way, if you would like to be a part of that program, we'd love to hear from you. Maybe you would like to be a guest, or someone who could be a guest. Well, reach out to us at the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com, the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com, and we have room for more patrons and sponsors. Thousands of people around the world listen to this program, and they'd like to hear your story, perhaps hear your message, and I bet you have something in your business that would be worthwhile, something that would benefit all of these fine people around the world. So if perhaps you would like to be on our sponsoring team and have the Cowboys and Radio Wranglers put together a great promo for you when you are the one who makes the Cowboy Up Podcast happen. So why don't you let us know that you'd like to be a part of the Cowboy Up Podcast too, as we roll into season 4, and it looks great things coming up. Reach out to us at thecowboyuppodcast@gmail.com, thecowboyuppodcast@gmail.com.
Do you ever tire about writing about Joe Pickett? You've had put so many words on paper about him. Do you wake up some days and say, I don't want to be Joe today?
No, that has not happened yet. I think mainly because the Joe Pickett, world is a whole family. They've all aged in real time. He has 3 daughters, and because the family gets older with each book and matures and goes in different directions, it's always interesting to me. I mean, Joe Pickett's getting a little older. He's in his early 50s now in the books, where he was 34 when the series started. So, with the passing of time, things kind of get more interesting or continue to stay interesting. But also, I think the introduction of all of the outside issues it makes every book a different book. Like I said, I don't, I know the books are classified as mystery or thriller or crime procedural or something like that. But to me, they're all really about whatever the issues are, and those always change. So it always stays interesting to me.
What's it like to see your stories and your books come to life on the screen? And how do you sit there and applaud it? Do you say, no, that's not the way I wrote it? Or, what's your reaction to that?
It's complicated, it's kind of otherworldly, for one thing, to think. Right now there are 2 television series based on my books, and Big Sky on ABC, which is into its 2nd season, and Joe Pickett, which launched as a Spectrum original, and then will go to Paramount Plus. And it's very interesting. I know going in that not everything that appears in every episode is going to be straight out of the book, and that there's going to be changes, there's going to be new characters, there's going to be all sorts of things. So I knew that going in. That wasn't a surprise. Sometimes I wonder why they go the direction that they do. But other times something will happen and I'll think, damn, I wish I would have put that in the book. That's pretty good. But it's just, like I said, kind of otherworldly. The best thing about it by far is that both of the shows have really generated a lot of interest in the books. The sales of the books have gone crazy since the two series have come out, and the publishers keep reprinting, the 21-year-old Joe Pickett book Open Season, because the first season of Joe Pickett is primarily based on that. So it attracts a lot of new readers, which is something I'd always hoped would happen. And so it's like, my wife and I kind of look at it as, 2 one-hour commercials every week for the books. And as long as you don't get too hung up on little changes that they make or certain casting decisions, then it all works out.
Well, you can always see how that works, because you'll see a book that maybe wasn't even real big, and it gets to be TV or movie, and all of a sudden it gets reprinted with the stars who played it on the cover. So it kind of went the other direction. You can
right,
see that in real time.
What happened with mine.
Yeah, you can see, except yours were already big. So since game wardens in Wyoming have such a diverse role and do all these things that you described, are they pretty excited to have Mr. Pickett out there representing them?
I think I would have to say yes. I've not yet met a game warden who thinks, oh, geez, there's that guy. Most of them like the idea of the way Joe Pickett is depicted, and I try to be very authentic in regard to, like his everyday activities, his education, his duties, responsibilities, his morals and ethics, and they like that because for the most part, this is the first series of books that have been written about a game warden. There's a couple more now, One in Maine I know of, one in Texas. But at the time, this was the first one, and they tend to like that. They've given me awards. The Wyoming Game Warden Foundation gave me a certificate of merit, and I do know the director of the Game and Fish, who has noticed an increase in interest in being a game warden since the TV show came out.
Do they ever get on you about all the pickups you burn up in your books and trash?
No, because most of them have similar stories. They are very unique. Game wardens are very unique in Wyoming in that there really is only 50 of them, and they do tend to work in pretty isolated circumstances and without backup, and they live in the districts that they're responsible for. So they're unique in law enforcement, and I think they like that portrayal of them because I think it's accurate.
Have any of them ever come to you and said, "I just had this amazing experience. Let me tell you about it"?
Yes. In fact,
no kidding.
I used a couple of the stories from actual game wardens and built books around them.
That's so cool.
One in particular is called Nowhere to Run. I don't know if you read that book, but it's about a game warden, encountering two identical twin brothers way up above the tree line in the Wind Rivers mountains, and then being basically hunted by those two brothers. And that's based on a real story. I, of course, embellished it and changed it, but that was based on a real encounter. And there's others, too, that, I don't make it. Here's the strange thing I always find is that actual stories of things that really happened are usually almost too fantastic to put in a fictional book. You have to almost make them less crazy for people to believe them.
To be realistic.
Well, Tom, that makes me think of Tom Clancy's quote. He says the difference between fiction and nonfiction is you have to make fiction believable. And
right.
I kind of live that here because I think if somebody fictionalized some of the stuff happens around these dude ranches, they'd go, that's silly. Your system, so to speak, your approach to writing, and maybe this isn't accurate, but it makes me feel like Law and Order series because it always felt like they took either a topic, an issue, or a specific instance that was reflective of a issue, and then fictionalized it and made a great show, and of course a hugely successful collection of series. Do you see any parallels?
Right. To some degree, yeah, certainly. Not in every book, but in some that are based on real incidents or, court cases or that kind of thing. Some are more just simply about things like wind energy or, extractive energy or endangered species or more issues as opposed to ripped out of the headlines kind of things.
Right. Cassie Duel, that's the other series, and that's the Big Sky TV show. Right. Is it hard, as a person who doesn't do what you do, is it hard to write a female character like that?
Well, it's very challenging. I've always since the very first book, I've always had characters that are certainly, different points of view. I mean, in Open Season, the first Joe Pickett book, a lot of the book is told from the point of view of his 7-year-old daughter. I had daughters at the time, so I kind of, observed them and leaned on them, a little bit. For Cassie Duel, I love to write that character, and I think the thing that a lot of male writers screw up when they write about female protagonists is they make them into like kick-ass, take no prisoners type thriller. Basically they make them into superhero men as opposed to writing about women. And because I have 3 daughters and a wife, and my editor's female and my agent's female, whenever I finish a Cassie Duel book and I send it to them, I I just kind of wait to see, for the dog that doesn't bark. Who's going to say, what are you, women don't talk like this, act like this, da da da. But generally that doesn't happen, and I think that's just because I try to keep it more real and authentic, and not over sexualize the protagonist, which is another thing male authors tend to do with female characters, I think. It's fun to write from that point of view, but it's certainly not me.
Right.
Well, that's amazing. All the stuff you do and all the books you write and everything, how do you keep your sanity? Because, you've got a TV series that you're involved with, and you've got books with, different kind of, the male and the female perspective. And then you have book festivals in Tucson and everything else. How do you keep your sanity with a load like that?
Well, I think I'm pretty well organized. I just have to. I treat it like a business. I think I'm always glad that I had a real life experiences before the books took off, so I could kind of know how to handle a lot of activities and be organized and learn to say no at times. I have friends who are authors who have never done anything other than write books, and they're just like a fish out of water when it comes to business and scheduling and other things. And luckily, I've got that background, and and my wife is a very important part of the business because she does all the financials and keeps up with contracts and scheduling and that sort of thing. So we kind of operate as a team, and I just consider it our latest small business in a way.
Your books are in 27 languages, and you had a 5-state travel business that brought international travelers into those states where they're really, at least in the past and hopefully really soon, were a big part of travel into those places. I can testify to it personally.
Yeah, and I
go ahead. Sorry. I was just going to ask you, do you combine those things? Do you go and do some book tours when it's not virus times out internationally?
I don't do it. I have gone to some international book events, but what I find is that they tend to be quite a bit different. The volume of sales and stuff is not as big as in the U.S. So although there's places I like to go, like the U.K. and Ireland, and a trip is being planned to Australia, New Zealand, because the books are very popular there, and I am looking forward to that. I certainly don't want to get back into the kind of drudgery of going overseas from country to country. I've done that. That's enough of that.
Well, we're excited to have you coming into the Tucson Festival of Books. I hope that plan has not changed.
No, it has not. That's one of my favorite things to do. I think this will be the 4th or 5th time I've been to the Tucson Festival of Books, and it's really worthwhile and rewarding. It's great that it kind of coincides with the new book coming out too, of course. But I tend to see as many people from Wyoming, Montana, Canada, in Tucson because they're wintering there, as I would if I went out on the road north. So it really is worthwhile.
Well, I'll make a comment. I tell this story. I can't remember the state, but it was a small northeastern state, and I was at a travel conference, and they were talking about that state had a really innovative approach to marketing themselves, and they didn't have enough money to really move a needle in terms of advertising or marketing. So instead what they did is they established a grant program for writers, and a writer could be a screenwriter or a novelist or travel book or whatever, and if they portrayed that state, whichever it was, in the book in a positive and significant way, then they got a grant. And I thought that's genius, is what that is. And
it is.
You're not getting grants, I'm sure, but Wyoming must love you because you're a great ambassador for that great state. And, Yellowstone is a great help to my business, our business, dude ranching. And so, sure. It's interesting how things like what you're doing with the TV and the books is going to have a lot of spillover for a state that will enjoy having it.
Well, I think it does. I've certainly seen some evidence of that. No, I don't get any grants.
No.
And there's nothing like that exists here.
No. No, I think that was innovative.
Our legislature would never do anything innovative, so I don't think that'll ever happen.
Well, sometimes I think that might be better. I don't know.
You're not thinking about running for governor, are you?
I am not. No, I like to take naps too much and, go fishing and hang out with grandkids. I have no interest in that regard.
Well, that's too bad, because you might scare the pants off of a few politicians that need their pants scared off of them.
Well, hey, we're going to see, hopefully Alan and I, because we're going to be there at the Tucson Festival of Books March 12th and 13th. We sure hope we're able to come over and shake your hand. Where else? Where can our listeners learn more about events that you might be attending? Or I assume the books are just everywhere, obviously. So, is there
the books will be everywhere.
Right.
March 7th is when the book will debut, and a lot of Arizona in this tour. I'm going to be in Scottsdale to start out for a couple of days, and then end the tour back in Tucson. But if anybody, out there hears this, would like to check on it, they can go to my website, which is cjbox.net, and it's got the calendar of events, and a few of the events are ticketed, so people have to make a reservation in advance. So I'd urge anybody who'd want to come to an event to check that out.
Well, that's, and so, of course, I want to reiterate, cjbox.net, N-E-T, cjbox.net. And that's where they can one-stop shop, figure out where to see you or follow what you're up
Absolutely.
to.
Absolutely.
Well, I've been thrilled today. I can't tell you how much I've been looking forward to this and talking to you. So I just personally want to thank you for being exactly who you are and being a really good guest.
Well, thank you very much. It's been fun.
Thank you. It was our great pleasure. See you in March.
Thank you, gentlemen, and what a great program. And we appreciate you, too, for being with us at the Cowboy Up Podcast. My name is Stan Husted. I'm the founder of What It Takes Radio and one of the leaders of what we call the Cowboy Spirit USA Experience, headquartered right here at the White Stallion Ranch in Tucson, Arizona. Now, it's probably a little bit too late to schedule a time for the book festival, but there's always a wonderful schedule, routine, all kinds of things to do in Tucson, Arizona. And of course, one of them is the White Stallion Ranch. And that would be well worthwhile just to come to Tucson just for the experience that you'll find right there. So we encourage you, for you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, even your company, to look it up and say, it's time to do something different. We're going to have a real cowboy experience. We're going to enjoy a little bit of the lore and legends of the West, perhaps even learn to sing a few cowboy songs. So why don't you look it up? WhiteStallion.com. That's WhiteStallion.com. And it's time for you, indeed, to cowboy up and come to Tucson.
Well, I've just had so much fun with our whole series of these podcasts, and the most fun is getting a real live wire on the other end that's articulate and has success and has, is fun and funny and articulate and everything. And we had that today. And so I love to immerse myself when I can in that. And I just want to say that I have more fun than the law allows when we're doing this. So I'm grateful for what we're doing and hope that anybody that might listen will take some pleasure out of this.
Well, I'll echo that I have so much fun doing this, and this was particularly fun for me because I was just so, and I don't use this word loosely, awed by CJ's intellect and just the way he handled the interview and clearly handles his life. And I'm going to put a little plug in for the industry that we shared for a while. I don't consider myself an author. I've put out a couple of books, but he's an author. But he came from hospitality, and a great friend of mine, Bea Blackledge, had a retirement party here one time in her plain-spoken way. She goes, nothing we do in this business is rocket science. We just work hard and take care of people. And I thought, I think that might be kind of what C.J. Box took from hospitality. He clearly works hard, clearly organized, really good with people. And I was just, what an interview and what an interesting guy. We were lucky to have him.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, there you go. We're done for the day. But again, it was even better the second time around, I think. At least, what happens is when you listen to a good program, a good special, if you listen to it sometimes 2 or 3 times, it gets better because you are more aware, you know a little bit about what's coming, and you pay a little greater attention, and you hear something the second time that you enjoy even more. So, as one of my mentors used to say to me, he said, Stan, if you found something that really you enjoyed or helped you, listen to it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. In fact, when he did a program for me, he made me listen to it 7 times because he said, if you listen to it that many times, it really can make a difference in that brain of yours. And that's true. Hey, I'm Stan Houston, so reach out to the Cowboy Up Podcast at just that, the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com, the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com. We'll have another great encore program with Loop Rollins, and his roping story. And that'll be coming up on another Cowboy Up Podcast encore. Thank you for your time. All the best and blessings to you. Bye for now.